मैम आप माइक आपका ऑफ है मैम. Today we'll be discussing about basic life support and we'll be discussing basic life support, and first in our discussion we'll be understanding the basics and principles behind what are the policies of basic life support, and in the end we'll finish this video with a demonstration video. So myself Dr. Rahul Jain, and these lectures are happening under the guidance of Dr. Sharda Jain. So coming on to first slide, which is contents. So as we usually do, first we will understand what is CPR, the definition, the chain of survival, critical concepts, and from there we'll finish with our circulation, airway breathing, and automatic external defibrillator. So this is the structural framework today, how we'll be going through the topic of basic life support. So coming on to the first topic, what is CPR? So we should be very clear what is CPR, and basically CPR refers to cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and it is a life-saving procedure for the victims who show sign of cardiac arrest. So the next question which comes are, what are the signs of cardiac arrest? So there are three signs of cardiac arrest. The patient becomes unresponsive, there is no pulse, and there is no breathing. And how are we trying to give CPR? By giving chest compression and breaths. So this is the basic thing we have to understand, that CPR is for the people who have cardiac arrest. So our role in cardiac arrest is to identify it by identifying the three signs, which is the patient becomes unresponsive, there is no pulse, no breathing, and the third component is we have to deliver high quality chest compressions and breaths. So this is about the CPR. Then when we say CPR, we have to define the age criteria. So we have adults, children, and infants. So when we say adults, we mean adolescents and older. When we say children, we are referring to the age of 1 year to age of puberty, and when we are referring infants, it is less than 1 year of age, but excluding neonates, because neonatal resuscitation is different from what resuscitation we are gonna learn. So basically, to understand, we will focus today on adult resuscitation, and we need to understand the difference between adults and children, and adolescents and are part of adults itself. Then chain of survival. So we have so this chain of survival is very important. So each and every figure in this chain of survival gives us the what is the next step we should perform by performing the CPR, or what is the cardiac arrest. So each and every step. So first, what is IHCA? IHCA refers to in-hospital cardiac arrest, and OHCA refers to out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So when I'm talking about in-hospital cardiac arrest, I mean a cardiac arrest happening inside the hospital. And when I'm talking about out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, it means any cardiac arrest we detect in our peripheral surroundings, or anyone we see collapsing, suffering from cardiac arrest or something like that is out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So we have to understand each and every step in each of them. So coming on to first in-hospital cardiac arrest. So in hospital cardiac arrest, these are the 5 steps. So first step is pre-recognizing the conditions which or the patients which are prone to go for cardiac arrest. So suppose I know there is this patient who is having severe hypotension or severe hypoxia inside the ICU. Then I know that this patient is prone to go for cardiac arrest, and there is a possibility of cardiac arrest. So it is part of in-hospital cardiac arrest. The first part of in-hospital cardiac arrest is identifying the conditions which or the patients which are already prone for going for cardiac arrest. Then the moment I see a cardiac arrest, the second sign refers to something which is phone is there. So I have to activate the EMS response, and if I'm not there in ICU or it has happened inside the hospital, so I have to I have to activate the EMS response. I have to activate the emergency medicine team, and I have to inform them that come to the place. I visualize the collapse, and if there are more than one people at the place, then I can ask someone else to do it. But the important thing is, this step is very important. Calling the activating the emergency medicine response is very important. The reason behind is that only CPR will not save the life of the patient. It will be the further interventions after CPR. So our goal is to first inform the EMS and then start the high quality CPR and this heart with a sign of electric shock refers to automatic external defibrillator and give early defibrillation. But activating the EMS response is very important. So first we have to activate the EMS response, then we have to start the high quality CPR, then give the automatic external defibrillation, and then there is post cardiac care, post cardiac arrest care. So similarly here also, out of hospital cardiac arrest I'm talking about, it can happen to anyone. So the moment it happens, if after recognizing it that it is cardiac arrest, I need to first activate the EMS response. If I'm alone, I have to do it first before starting the CPR. But if there are more than one people with me to help, I will ask one of them to go and activate and tell the ambulance to come at the spot wherever the cardiac I've seen cardiac arrest happening, and I have to tell the location, the condition, and all those things. So first is informing the activating the EMS response even outside, because if I just start doing CPR and since I have not informed anyone and I cannot keep doing CPR forever, I will also get tired, and there is a limit to do CPR because CPR is not effective as actual heart contractions. It will also cause certain hypoxia to the brain. Even though I'll give high quality CPR, there is certain hypoxia to the brain will occur. So I need to shift the patient immediately to hospital. So always the first step is activating the EMS response or calling the ambulance, which is the number in India is 102 or 108. So we need to first activate the EMS response. I'll focus on this again, and then I have to go on to early CPR, then automatic external defibrillation, and then I have to shift the hospital. Then there is post cardiac care, post cardiac arrest care. So I hope this IHCA and OHCA is very clear, and the most important thing is what has to be focused upon is activating the EMS response first. So when I identify or recognize cardiac arrest, I have to activate the EMS response first. So this is the same thing which is explained that in hospital cardiac arrest, it is this first is surveillance, prevention, treatment of pre-arrest conditions. So I will obviously keep a note of the patients who can go for pre-arrest, and then I'll be more vigilant for those people. Then immediately recognition of cardiac arrest, and how will we recognize cardiac arrest? The three same signs: unresponsive state, no pulse, no breathing. So these are the signs of cardiac arrest. Then coming on to immediate recognition and activation of EMS. So I have to first activate the emergency medicine response. Then I have to start early CPR and rapid defibrillation. So this is the part which we'll be focusing and learning today, that how to do CPR and what is AED and things like that. But important thing is, if it has happened out of the hospital, even in hospital, the immediate recognition activation of EMS is the first step always. And this is the step which will reduce the mortality. If we just start doing early CPR and rapid defibrillation, it won't matter if there is no emergency medicine team coming at the spot to shift the patient. Then in the end, always there is post-cardiac arrest care. Similarly, in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest also, there is first is immediate recognition of cardiac arrest. The same signs of cardiac arrest, we have to see that is no pulse, no breathing, and unresponsive patient, and activation of EMS. Then early CPR, rapid defibrillation, and then the moment emergency team comes to the rescue, they will start with advanced life support, and then again the post cardiac arrest care after shifting and transferring the patient to hospital. Then we need to know few things because it becomes an important concept in case of performing the CPR. So basically, the CPR consists of compression and breaths. So we need to be very clear with about the compression and breaths. So first of all, the goal, the moment person collapses, or if we visualize any fall, or if we are, any person has fallen in our vicinity, we should first detect and recognize the cardiac arrest within 10 seconds. So within 10 seconds is our goal, and we have to make sure we have to determine the diagnosis of cardiac arrest. Same steps, that is no pulse, no respiration, and no responsiveness, unresponsiveness, and we have to detect these things within 10 seconds, and then immediately we have to start the compressions. Then when I'm doing compression, what is more important, the things which have to be kept in mind, that rate of compression which has to be done is almost equivalent to 100 to 120 per minute, and which means almost equivalent to per second. So I have to do two compressions per second. Then depth by through almost through which I have to push the compressions should be 5 centimeters, and minimum in adults and children it becomes 4 centimeter, and it is almost equivalent to one third of the depth of the chest. So depth of more than 5 centimeters, maybe 6 centimeters, 7 centimeter will cause fractures to the rib cage, and depth less than 5 centimeters, that is 4 or 3 centimeters for adults, will not cause effective compression. So this 5 centimeter is a golden number for doing CPR in case of adults, and 4 centimeter in case of children, or usually the value is one third the depth of the chest. Then coming to third step, that after doing each compression, we should also allow for complete chest recoil. So we should let the chest come up. The reason behind is that each time we compress, each time we do compression, it will be the blood which will be ejected out of the heart. But each time we let the recoil happen properly, it will be the filling of the heart which will happen properly. So two things are very important. Filling is also important, and even ejection is also very important. Then giving effective breath, we have to give the breath in a way that it makes the chest rise. We will understand and we will see everything in demonstration video, that how each thing is happening. But to remember, always have to keep these things in our mind while performing the CPR. That allowing the complete chest recoil 5 centimeters, and rate should be 100 to 120 per minute. Then a question that what is the difference between cardiac arrest and heart attack? And sometimes people use it synonymously, and it should be differentiated. And they are two different conditions. So when we discuss heart attack, in our previous videos also we have discussed under ischemic heart diseases, where we have something called as acute coronary syndrome. So those acute coronary syndromes are referred to as heart attack, and in during a heart attack, the person will be probably be conscious most of the time, and in sudden cardiac arrest while is an electrical problem, and it is a immediate emergency. Like if a person suffers from sudden cardiac arrest, he probably does not have more than 3 to 4 minutes, because neural hypoxia, the neurons can only withstand up to 2 minutes, 2 to 2.5 minutes. So sudden cardiac arrest is ultimate emergency, and while heart attack can be taken care within hour and two, but sudden cardiac arrest is an immediate problem. We need to address sudden cardiac arrest. So one is a mechanical problem, one is an electrical problem. So heart attack is a circulation problem, and cardiac arrest is an electrical problem. So I hope the difference between cardiac arrest and heart attack is clear. And coming on to building blocks of CPR. So now for people who don't know CPR, we can, and they have no training, zero training. So WHO the American Heart Association has also brought this, and they have told they can only perform hands-only CPR. So if I am there at a if I'm there at a place where there are multiple people to help, then I can take anyone's help to perform the chest compressions while I can coordinate the whole thing. So if a person is highly trained, then if a person has no training, then they can only do hands-only CPR, and obviously people who are trained and people who know about the CPR can do compression and ventilation as well, and then people who are experts in ACLS and BLS and all those things become the multi-respiratory coordinated CPR, and the team can include 3 people, 4 people, where one person can handle airway, one person can handle ventilation, one person can do compression, then one person can keep the count, then one person duty is to obtain IV access, one person duty is to administer drugs and all those things. So just it is a part of building blocks of CPR, that is people with no training can only perform hands only CPR, and people who are highly trained can take it to next level and can coordinate the whole event. Then coming on to the what are the main components of CPR. So when I'm talking about cardiopulmonary resuscitation, there are 3 components, and to remember them, simply we have to remember CAB. So compressions, airway, and breathing. So again, each and every word has a meaning and significance to it. That when we're talking about compressions, uh, compression means push fast on the center of victim's chest. So again, we'll read about chest compression. So basically, when we are doing chest compressions, we are trying to contract and relax the heart at the rate of 100 to 120 per minute with depth of usually 5 centimeter, allowing the complete chest recoil. And while doing this, we are trying to pump the blood to the brain and other parts of the body. When we are doing airway, what are we doing in airway? We are trying to keep the airway of the patient. We are trying to maintain the airway. We are trying to keep it patent. And when we are doing breathing, we are trying to provide the air to the lungs via the patent airway. So if my airway is not patent, my breaths won't be delivered. So each step is very important and has to be taken care of in the order. So first it is always compressions, then keeping the airway patent, then delivering the high quality breaths. So C, A, B, and we have discussed the significance of each. Then this is the summary of the whole thing, what we have to understand today. And this is the thing which we have to remember and learn to give CPR to anyone. And we will discuss each and every step very clearly and slowly. So then first of all, the first step is verifying the scene safety. So it is very important to verify the scene safety. And what do we mean by scene safety? So suppose, see this in this condition, the victim is collapsed in burning building, or if in middle of the busy road, or the patient has drowned, and in the case of drowning, now we have found him and he is unresponsive. So we cannot just start doing CPR then and there. We have to start. We have to make the scene safe for us also, safe for patient also. So in the middle of busy road, I cannot start the CPR. So pull the patient apart on the side of the road, and there I will start the CPR, or I will try to assess the patient first. Then second, verify scene safety. If in the case of burning building, then I cannot start doing CPR inside the burning building. I have to wait for evacuation, or I have to. The condition has to be safe for me and as well as for the patient. Then, in case of drowning, drowning is important because if I attach automatic external defibrillator and the patient is wet, then there's a chance that I can also get electrocuted. So I need to dry the patient first. So this is about the out of hospital cardiac arrest. In hospital cardiac arrest, this scene safety point won't come much. Then one more point is this patient is in prone position. So I can see this figure. I cannot give a CPR in prone position. I have to make the patient with the face turned upwards. The back should be on flat, firm surface with hands by the side of the body, so that I can deliver high quality CPR. Then, so point is verifying the scene safety, and it is very important to check for the scene safety. Then I have seen a victim is the victim is unresponsive. Obviously, that's why we have approached the scene. And so, first step, if there are bystanders around us, we will shout for nearby help and ask them to activate emergency response immediately. If then because we know the patient is unresponsive, and how to check for this responsiveness, I will tap on patient's shoulder and I will shout, "Are you okay?" So, and then I will look for the response. So I have to tap on the patient's shoulder, and I have to look for, and I have to ask, "Are you okay?" And once I make sure that the victim is unresponsive, I have to activate the emergency medicine response. So we are following the same thing what we have studied in this chain of survival, that after in out of hospital cardiac arrest, it is the first is the recognition of cardiac arrest, and then second is activation of EMS. So same thing we are following here. So first thing is verifying the scene safety. The scene should be safe. Always we should check that if the scene is safe or not. Then second is, the moment we determine that victim is unresponsive, we have to activate EMS. And if we are alone, we only have to go and activate the ambulance system and EMS and ask them to come to the point of cardiac arrest. But if there are people around us, we can ask one of them to do it, and then we can immediately start with our resuscitation cycle. So, but first important point is activating the EMS. So, however, we have to activate it first. Then the second step is within 10 seconds, I have to make sure that this is the cardiac arrest and not anything else. So there are multiple things which. So first of all, I have to determine within 10 seconds that person is not having no person is having no pulse and person is not breathing. So to determine those two things, there's a method that I will go onto the side of the neck of the patient and I will feel for the trachea. And through these three fingers, I will just go on the side of trachea and I will try to feel for the pulse. And at the same time, I will look at the patient's chest. So this should happen, this should not take more than 10 seconds and we should at least take 5 seconds. So 5 to 10 seconds time is the standard time to look for no breathing and for checking pulse. So now within 10 seconds I have determined that what is the status of pulse and what is the status of breathing. So now there are three possibilities. First of all, both present. So there is breathing also present, pulse also present. If both are present, I will still need emergency medicine response and because I will need to shift the patient to hospital to look for the to look why the patient has fallen. It can be mild. It can just might be mild syncope. It can just might be. It can be even a seizure, and there can be multiple causes. But I need to differentiate it from that. This is not cardiac arrest because the patient with normal breathing and pulse won't require any resuscitation. So, but I will wait till the emergency responders arrive. Will inform the condition, shift the patient into the ambulance, and then my work will be there. Will be over. But another possibility is the person is having difficulty breathing but has pulse. So person when the person there is no normal breathing and the person has pulse, there are only very few conditions which will satisfy the need this criteria that there is pulse is present but there is no normal breathing or gasping breathing or no breathing. So in those patients, first of all, I will only provide ventilation and that should be around 10 to 12 breaths per minute. How to provide breaths and ventilation, that we will discuss in further slides, but the patient who has only trouble with breathing, the breaths only will be provided and not only, the pulse is normal so we need not do compressions. Then every 2 minutes we have to check pulse and then sometimes initially there is pulse and after 2 minutes if we don't find pulse then we have to start the CPR, that is compressions as well. And if the condition is that we have found a person with IV drug abuse marks and we have found the needles and along with then I know that it is maybe morphine overdose and all. So morphine directly depresses respiratory system. So there I will just administer naloxone if it's available. That will reverse the respiratory depression and the patient will breathe normally. Then the most important scenario that there is no breathing or there is only gasping and there is no pulse. So pulse is absent. So in those conditions, I will begin CPR and the golden number is 30:2. That is, I will give 30 compression cycles and I will provide 2 breaths after 30 compression. So what I say that when we are doing compression, we should count loudly. So 1, 2, 3, 4 till 30, and then we give 2 breaths. So if there are more than one people around us which are coordinating the CPR, they will always know that when I am going to finish compressions, and then they will be handling over the ventilation. They can take over the ventilation. But if we are alone, again counting will help us to know that where are we in the status of 30:2. So 30 is to 2 is the golden number. That is 30 compression followed by 2 breaths. And if there is AED available, so before starting the CPR, we have to attach the AED pads. So there are two types of AED pads attachment that also we will see. That is either it can be anterior lateral or it can be anterior posterior. So there are two pads in case of automatic external defibrillator, and the moment how do we have to attach it? One pad we have to attach below the right clavicle, and another patch we have to just keep below the left nipple, in the side below the armpit. So first, if aid is available, always get the AED. Then start the compressions and breaths. So the moment you connect the AED, it will analyze the rhythm, and if the rhythm is shockable, it will provide the shock, and if it is non-shockable, it will tell that the rhythm is non-shockable. Then in both the cases, if the rhythm is shockable or non-shockable, after it gets over the AED check, we have to again resume the CPR. So CPR remains same. If the AED is there and if we connect the automatic external defibrillator, machine will instruct us when to resume the CPR and when it is analyzing the victim or when it is providing. So, but in other times, wherever the machine is dormant or latent, we have to keep doing the CPR in cycles of 30 compression, 2 breaths. And if AED is not available, then after doing 5 cycles of 30:2, we can assess the pulse again. It's better till the EMS response arrives if we can keep continuing the CPR. Then we have already discussed scene safety. This was the first step, scene safety. Always verification of scene safety is important. We have to keep us and patient both safe, and we have to make sure the conditions around us are safe for both of patient us, that is patient, and us. We are providing the BMS. Then how to assess response, breathing and pulse. Again, we have discussed this. Tap the victim's shoulder. Shout, "Are you okay?" And if patient is unresponsive, if there are people around us, we have to shout for help. If there is no one around us, we are alone, then we have to only go activate the EMS first. Then we have to assess breathing and pulse. So we can see that this patient, this person, this doctor, when he's assessing the pulse, he's come to the side of the patient. The two fingers are on the side of the trachea. He's trying to assess pulse, and at the same time, while assessing pulse, he's looking at the chest for breaths. So he's doing both the things simultaneously, and this should not take more than 10 seconds, and we should at least spend 5 seconds in assessing breaths and pulse. Then coming to compressions. So compressions again it's like a revision. We have discussed this in critical concepts also, that first of all, when I'm doing compressions, then what is the rate? That is 100 to 120 beats per minute. And where should I keep my hand? It should be kept over the lower sternum, so center of the chest and lower sternum. There I will keep my hand, and have to compress at least 5 centimeters or 1/3 of the chest depth, and the ratio should be 30:2, and victim should be on flat, firm surface with face up. So again, this should not happen. That the patient is off. We cannot administer compressions and breaths with the patient lying prone or in a weird fashion. We have to make them go supine and flat, firm surface with face up. So even the surface should not be tilted or something like that. So patient should be on flat, firm surface with face up. Then airway. So there are two methods which we use in this BLS to maintain the airway. So in this diagram, we can see clearly that in this figure, when the patient's head is just lying down straight, then the tongue and the airways collapsed. But the moment I will do head tilt and chin lift, so the moment I will do chin lift and head tilt, the airway becomes patent. And the moment airway becomes patent, then only I can provide the breaths. So in the first scenario here, if I provide breaths, the breaths won't get delivered inside the chest, won't get delivered inside the lungs. So our effort will be worthless. It will be waste. So it's very important after normal compression, while we're providing ventilation, to maintain the airway first and then going for breaths. So airway is very important, and we will see how to demonstrate jaw thrust and head tilt and chin lift in our video. Then coming on to breaths. So again, there are few guidelines in providing the breath. So first of all, delivering each breath over 1 second. Then there should be visible chest rise with each breath. So the moment we deliver each breath, we should see the chest rising. Then the ratio is 30:2. So when I'm doing 30, if I and I'm alone, then I'm doing 30 compressions and then I'm providing two breaths. So if I'm alone, I only have to provide breath and I only have to resume the chest compression. So the resumption of chest compression should not take more than 10 seconds. It should be resumed within 10 seconds. The moment I stop chest compressions to provide breaths. And if there are more than two helpers or two rescuers or more than one rescuer, then one person can take over the airway and breathing and one person can take over the compression, and there we can definitely manage less than 10 seconds. Then to providing breaths, we have pocket mask, bag and mask ventilation, and we have mouth to mouth breathing. And as far as pocket mask and bag and mask ventilation are there, we use EC technique. So what is this EC technique? So in the second figure, if I can see that the doctor's thumb and index finger are making C, and when I'm looking at the other three fingers, that is middle finger, ring finger, and little finger, they are making E. So basically, with the help of C, I'm trying to make a air seal. So I'm trying to make a air seal tight around the mouth so that the air doesn't get leaked. And with the help of my three fingers, I'm trying to do chin lift. So I'm trying to maintain the airway, and then I'm trying to provide the breaths. So it is very important to do both the things simultaneously. And if airway is not patent, then my delivering my breaths will be a waste of time. So keeping the airway patent is very important. Then coming on to almost last thing, which is automatic external defibrillator. So we won't have automatic external defibrillator available today in a demonstration video, but then once we understand these concepts, it will become very easy to how to use it, and it's a quite simple procedure. So first of all, we have to open the carrying case. So there will be carrying case of automatic external defibrillator. We have to open it, we have to switch it on, and then we have to connect the pads to the bare chest. So how are we connecting them? We have to. There are two types of connecting possibilities. So one is anterolateral and one is anterior-posterior. So when I'm talking about anterolateral, this is the anterolateral I've shown, and it's again I've discussed this before. That one I will place in below the right clavicle, and another I will place just below the left nipple, just below the armpit. So I will place these two, and then I will switch on the AED, and then AED will keep doing its work. And the times when AED is delivering the shock or when the AED is analyzing the rhythm, we have to clear the victim and we have to not touch the victim at that time. Other times, or if there is no shock needed and after delivering shock, we have to keep doing our compressions and rescue breaths with the ratio 30:2. So every 2 minutes, it will again analyze the rhythm and will tell us that if shock is required to be given or not. And irrespective of shock is required to be given or not, we have to if the shock is already delivered, then also we have to immediately resume CPR. And if there is no shock required, then also we have to resume CPR. So again, 30:2 becomes a golden number. Then I will summarize the same thing and summarize the same thing what we have discussed, and we'll just try to remember it. Then the moment we see the patient, we should tap on the patient's shoulders and we should ask them, "Are you okay?" And we have to determine they're unresponsive. The moment we know they're unresponsive, we have to activate the EMS. So in India, it is 102 or 108. Uh, After we activate, we have to check for breathing or and pulse. So and if we have determined that there is no breathing and no pulse, then we have to start compressions, and then we have to provide the breaths. And if AED is available, then we have to immediately connect it first. That is, after step 3, it will come. The step which will come next will be connecting the AED pads. Then with little case discussion we will do, and if anyone wants to try, what will we do in this case? Ma'am, your mic is not open.
what we will have a demonstration by you on the dummy, and then we will have a case discussion. Okay?
Okay, ma'am.
Right.
Ma'am, demonstration video. Suppose this is a person. His name is Mr. Kaka, and he's 60-year-old, and we witness his collapse on the road. Then what should be the first next step? So we'll go. So first of all, we'll determine, is it an out of hospital cardiac arrest or in hospital cardiac arrest? So obviously it is out of hospital cardiac arrest, and it is not happening in hospital. So we have to follow the chain of survival of out of hospital cardiac arrest.
Correct.
Then the first step we discussed was verifying the scene safety. So is the scene safe?
No.
We have to pull the patient either to the side or not in the middle of the road, on the side of the road, or wherever there it will be safe for us to deliver the CPR. Then second step will become checking for responsiveness. So we check for responsiveness. How will we check for responsiveness?
Back and ask him kaise ho.
Yes. Then afterwards, if the responsiveness was not intact, then the second step will become activating the EMS, which is again the most important step, because we cannot keep continuing doing CPR. Our efforts of giving the CPR will go waste. Patient will never be revived unless the EMS team arrives on the spot and provides the drugs and stuff like that.
Correct.
So then the next step will be, after we have informed the EMS, it become assessing the pulse and breathing. So suppose
Correct.
after assessing of pulse and breathing, there was no pulse, there was no breathing. Then I have to immediately start CPR till the help arrive, and if AED is available. So normally in airports and all, AED will be available. So we can always connect that AED, and then we can start giving high quality CPR. And if AED is not available, then still we can give high quality CPR. And if someone doesn't understand anything like how to give CPR, then we can only give compressions. That also will help patients somehow.
Yes.
So coming again, just one thing important here, that same here, this building blocks are showing that only, that if the patient has no training, if the person has no training who is providing the CPR, and he wants to provide the CPR, then only hands-only CPR will also help. If this 30:2 is also becoming very complicated for the person, then also hands-only CPR is this only chest compression become very important. And sometimes what happens that there is no mask available, and maybe the patient is infective and all, then no one wants to do mouth-to-mouth breaths, and mask is not available in a condition, then only chest compression will also help. So we can at least do chest compressions, if not even ventilation. And yes, we'll revise this one more time. So verifying the scene safety, asking the patient, so if the victim is unresponsive, are you okay? If patient is unresponsive, activating the EMS, then checking for pulse and breathing. 3 possibilities: normal breathing, normal pulse. Wait with the patient until the EMS arrives. Keep checking again pulse and breathing every 2 minutes. Then if no breathing, normal breathing, but has pulse, then provide only ventilation, don't do compressions, and check after 2 minutes. If again now pulse is not there, then resume CPR. And if there is a opioid overdose possibility, then administering naloxone will correct the no normal breathing. Then if both are absent, go for CPR 30:2. And if AED is available, connect the AED, follow the AED, and if AED is not available, just keep continuing with 30:2 CPR.
Good.
So I hope it's very clear. And now the most important thing is, it is very simple. Like we should not there should be no efforts in thinking that what should be the next step. The next step should become a reflex for performing a good CPR. So I hope it becomes very simple. Check for responsiveness, activate EMS, assess if no pulse and breathing available, start CPR. We have to summarize it. We will keep it very simple, and this is how we follow it. And each and every next step should become reflex to perform a good CPR. And I don't think it is very hard to remember it. The basically recognize the condition, activate the EMS, and start the CPR.
Yes.
So
I
with
think,
this-
there's a high time that the government of India takes a decision that every student before leaving class 10th should be trained in BLS. Before class 12th, again, he should get it repeated, have a repeat certificate. And again, in colleges, the person should have it. Every driver should know it. Every darban should know it. And everybody who's working in a clinic should know about it. And I think, the parents should also take this training, because sometimes the children give problems at home. And if the parents do not know, then I think the precious time is lost. So with this, Rahul, we would like you to demonstrate the thing on a dummy. Thank you very much.